아, 안녕하세요. 아침 9시가 조금 넘었습니다. 오늘은 영어 학원을 가는 날이에요. 너무 피곤합니다. 오늘도 흐려요. 날씨가 엄청 흐립니다. 운동할게요.
Right here, the United States is lowest in numerous categories. We're lower than the world.
Lower than
We're
the world?
lower than
What is that?
Europe.
In what?
Look,
In what?
take a look. Right here. Here's case death.
Oh, you're doing death as a proportion of cases. I'm talking about death as a proportion of population. That's where the US is really bad.
Well,
Much worse than South Korea, Germany, etc.
you can't do that. You have
Why
to go.
can't I do
You
that?
have to go by. You have to go by where. Look, here is the United States. You have to go by the cases. The cases.
Why not as a...
Joining me now are Chief Medical Correspondent Dr. Sanjay Gupta and Dr. Peter Hotez in the National School of Tropical Medicine
동명이랑
College
부부가
of Medicine.
때문에
Dr.
싸우고
Hotez is also working on a potential
아우.
COVID-19 vaccine. Dr. Hotez, you heard the president characterizing the numbers. Does that make sense to you?
You know, he's having a lot of trouble getting his arms around the scope of this problem. Let's look at what's really going on. We'll be at 160,000 deaths probably by the end of this week. Anderson, that's 160,000 times the story we just heard. Your interview. I mean, people losing their spouses, their parents, their brothers, their sisters. It's just absolutely devastating, and the deaths there's no end in sight to these deaths. We'll soon be going up to 200,000 deaths by September, October. Institute for Health Metrics says 230,000 deaths by the end of October. We could easily be at 300,000 deaths, double the current number by the end of the year, with no interest or curiosity about how to contain this virus when we know we can do it. All of these deaths are preventable, and we just cannot get any movement out of the White House. And I just can't understand why we don't move forward on this. Instead, we see these sort of cherry picking of data that are generally totally irrelevant to the real situation.
And Sanjay, I mean, the president again today doubling down on this, this claim that the cases are rising because of increased testing, and if we stop testing, then there wouldn't be so many cases. I mean, when you look at the testing numbers he was going off, it's still not as much as the country needs.
No, it's not, and you don't get coronavirus from doing a test, right? It's like people have said you don't get pregnant from doing a pregnancy test. It's to try and find people who are infected, isolate them, quarantine their contacts, and from a public health perspective, bring the numbers down. We've never gotten to that point. Right now testing is sort of surged into places that are hot spots to try and identify people in those places, and then moving to another spot in the country. It's kind of like putting pressure on wounds as opposed to addressing the underlying issue. So there are objective ways, Anderson, to look at whether or not we are testing enough. The positivity rate, a term that a lot of people now know. Basically, out of 100 people, how many came back positive? If that number's 5 or below, that gives you an idea that you're testing enough. We haven't gotten to that low a positivity rate, so we're not testing enough, and it's not accomplishing what it needs to accomplish in terms of.
Sanjay, can you just explain the difference between deaths per case and deaths related to the population?
So, in this case, there's an IFR, infected fatality ratio, which is basically the deaths out of people who have been infected. So you take a look, it's not on the right side of the screen now, but I did the calculations earlier, that's roughly around 3%. But if you start looking at per population in the United States, we're about 480 people die per million in this country. That's based on the overall population of the country. But the thing is, Anderson, I think this is just different. This is a pandemic, as Peter was sort of alluding to. I mean, the whole world is affected by this. And so we are less than 5% of the world's population, and we make up 20 to 25% of the world's infections, 20 to 25% of the world's deaths, sadly, as well. So, I mean, however you want to look at it, absolute numbers, relative numbers, whatever it may be, whatever makes sense to you. But the fact of the matter is that we're doing an awfully poor job in this country, especially compared to the rest of the world.
Well, also, Dr. Hotez, I mean, the countries we are in league with in terms of competing for the #1 spot, which we're in, are Brazil, and I think India is now in third. I mean, countries that have under-resourced health systems. I mean, in Brazil, the healthcare infrastructure is nowhere near what it needs to be.
No, absolutely. I mean, this is crazy. And the president, made some comment of the fact, well, the high number is due to the historical issue that we had in New York back in March and April. I just wrote the numbers down. Right now, in the last 7 days, the U.S. is #1 in terms of number of new cases over a 7-day period, 421,000 cases. We're also #1 in terms of deaths. 7,500 deaths over the last week. So as was pointed out, 1,000 deaths per day. We exceed India, we exceed Brazil, we exceed everybody else. And what I'm so angry about is the fact that there is still no good faith effort to do something about it, certainly at the federal level, when we know that's what has to be done. And how does this end? We can't just let this go on now for another 4 or 5 months at this pace.
Yeah, and so I mean, the fact that the White House tweets out a president at a White House task force meeting in the Oval Office. I mean, he hasn't attended one since April.
He hasn't attended one since April, and even if he's talking to the task force members, which I know he has, we've done some reporting on this, he's not listening to them. I mean, that's the thing, is that
in fact, he's attacking them. He's now attacking works, and obviously he's attacking them.
Yeah, and it's sort of befuddling, because at first I thought, does he just not know, and therefore he's saying things that are demonstrably wrong? But that's not the case. I mean, he is being told by task force members. Today you saw an actual meeting in the Oval Office. He said he got briefed by Dr. Fauci, as you know, Anderson, before our last town hall. But then he's saying things that are just diametrically opposed to what he's hearing. So I don't get the meetings don't seem to make much of a difference.
Yeah, Sanjay, Dr. Hotez, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. More breaking news ahead. President Trump went on the attack again today against Nevada and his new legislation expanding mail-in voting. Well, at the same time, he now magically says mail-in voting is great in his home state, his new home state of Florida, where they just so happen to have a lot of Republicans who vote mail-in. So all of a sudden, Florida mail-in is great, Nevada, not so much. We'll talk to the Nevada governor
Hello everyone, I'm CNN meteorologist Tom Sater. This weather watch is in association with Maldives. And what was our typhoon Hagibit, now the remnants making its way into northeast China, will slide across the Korean peninsula. And it has been dropping some rainfall and will continue to do so. In fact, widespread flash flooding north of Shanghai now. But when we get in closer, we're going to show you some of the accumulation values that we're going to have for around South and North Korea. Our center is still near Shanghai, but the moisture now really kind of breaking down over eastern China is going to pick up again when it runs over that moisture source. Even though it's losing its punch as far as the winds are concerned, take a look at these totals. Yesterday in Pyongyang, this forecast had about 130 millimeters, and now we're almost up to 200, Seoul 81. So widespread flash flooding, a big concern in the Korean peninsula. Look at the numbers. You see Manila at 32 degrees, Ho Chi Minh City.
지금 여기는 비가 안 오는데
Coastal areas of
경기
Taiwan,
북부랑 이쪽은 비가 많이 오나 봐요.
into areas of the western provinces.
여기는
Myanmar
비가 안 와요.
rainfall. Big
엄청
concern.
흐려요.
A third of Bangladesh remains submerged. Hyderabad, thunderstorms. Mumbai gets a break as the forecast models want to keep heaviest rainfall just offshore. But we'll watch flooding to be a big problem from Gujarat all the way down to the south.
A year like no other. Means an election like no other. The 2020 conventions are coming. The Democrats, the Republicans. Special live coverage starts August 18th, only on CNN.
I'm Anna Stewart in the City of London, and this is CNN.
breaking news tonight, President Trump has lashed out again at Nevada's governor for pushing legislation that greatly expanded the use of absentee balloting in the state election in Nevada.
In Nevada, where you have a governor, he said, let's just send out millions of ballots and the post office cannot be prepared. I haven't spoken to the post office about it, but I don't know how they could possibly be prepared.
In the general election, I think that state election, the president yesterday called that legislation a coup and threatened to file suit to somehow stop it. Nevada's governor, Steve Sisolak, I spoke to him just before airtime. Governor, the mail-in voting legislation that you signed, explain what it does and how it impacts voters in your state.
Well, what it does is it was extremely important to myself and the legislature. First off, I apologize. Thank you for having me on to give me an opportunity to explain this. What this is going to do is make it so that folks, our constituents, don't have to choose between staying healthy and exercising their right to vote. It's extremely important to me that everyone who wants to vote has that opportunity and we make it accessible for them. Right now, obviously we're in the middle of a pandemic. I don't anticipate that much changing by the time we get to the election, but what will happen is everyone will have a ballot mailed to them. They will be able to fill out that ballot, send that ballot back, and have a count in lieu of having to stand in line and vote in person.
If somebody sends it in, what happens if they go to the voting booth to try to vote?
You can't vote twice. There's a cross-reference on there. So if they mail it in, then they can't vote in person. You can only vote one time. Now you can fill out your mail-in ballot, and if you choose to bring it in, because some people just have a tradition of wanting to come every election and vote in person, you can bring your ballot and turn it in, and that's fine, or you can take it to a mailbox and vote it, mail it in. But everybody is limited to voting one time. It's totally safe. We had this situation in our primary. We had an all mail-in primary that everybody had a ballot mailed to them. They got to mail it in, or if they chose to show up on election day, they could show up at their polling place and vote. But this just gives you another opportunity to exercise your right and still maintain your safety.
No surprise, President Trump attacked you on the move, tweeting, "In an illegal late-night coup, Nevada's clubhouse governor made it impossible for Republicans to win the state. Post office could never handle the traffic of mail-in votes without preparation, using COVID to steal the state. See you in court." I don't know if you want to respond to that.
Well, I don't know what a clubhouse governor is, so I can't respond to that part of it. What we did is we took public comment for this. People had the opportunity to make comments. There's no
오늘 여기까지 하겠습니다.
now whether the Republicans win is
씻고
going to
영화하고 가야겠어요.
the candidate that we feel is going to be most effective moving into 2021. That's who's going to win the state of Nevada.
The hypocrisy that on President Trump's, attacking you on this is he's now encouraging